It has been a while since we caught up, so we are going over everything from comics to TV series to movies and maybe even a little bit more today. Hello, and welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask. Hey, Todd. How long has it been?
So long. I don't know what's going on.
It seems like every time we start this, it's been a while. And like, as try as we may, this year just keeps fighting back against us in terms of getting on a schedule.
Well, the thing I keep thinking of is there's this widening ripple effect of the pandemic. And, because this whole week as we were talking about, when we're doing the podcast, I thought, wow, it's so crazy to think that we were more consistent during the lockdown than now. But I think just the consequences of all that cooped upness are like hitting us, just sort of week after week. It's whether it's good, whether it's positive because it's like, oh, we're going out and doing normal social things now, or negative, like our work's taking us over, or we're having crazy tech problems that we can't get past.
Yeah.
It's definitely like a rippling post-pandemic lockdown world we're in. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm sure others are in a similar boat, so I'm not going to dwell too much on it. This is going to probably sound a little more like a classic Todd and Taylor episode, both in sound quality because we're just recording straight to Skype. Like when we first started way back in the day, we were just recording on Google Hangouts is that right? Google Hangouts.
Well, when we started, we used to, oh my God, we did a Skype call and we individually recorded on Audacity and then spliced that whole thing together. And it was an effing nightmare.
That was the original. That's right.
For like a year, we were like, why doesn't Skype just have a record button? That would fix everything.
Everything. Yeah. And they do now. Now it's like, it seems like a no-brainer, but there was a time,
right,
boys and girls, where Skype, you had to get like 3 separate apps that weren't made by Skype and try to daisy chain them together. And it was a royal nightmare. Eventually, Google Hangouts gave us that ability so we could call each other and then just record it. And it went straight to like YouTube or somewhere where we could archive it. It was great. This was even before like Zoom and that kind of stuff. So then now everybody's on the same page. We're just recording straight to Skype. I'm actually sitting in my car on my AirPods because we have some unplanned house construction going on that my lovely wife set up and I was not in the loop. So this is my backup plan. I think it's okay. We'll get through it. You're in a much sort of more professional environment, I believe.
But let's not forget that we did try to do this a couple of weeks ago where we were both in like our studio environments. And had so many tech problems, we had to just like call it. I mean, it was like canceling it for a rain, the baseball game getting canceled for rain or something. It was like, oh my God, it's been a half an hour. Let's just pull the plug. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So,
wow. And this, it kind of takes us back to when we first started this. Part of the fun was we're just going to we're just going to go and keep making it better as we go and just as free and free flowing as we can get it. And the more sort of casual, the better. So maybe we could recapture some of that early Todd and Taylor show magic. I don't know.
I agree. Plus, I have fond memories of sitting in a car in a Starbucks parking lot on my earbuds talking to you and Emily about Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Because I had like just moved back to California and had nothing set up. I don't even think I had an apartment at that point. I was staying with friends and, just went and got a cup of coffee and sat in my car to talk about the latest episode for Wednesday in Westeros. So
I forgot about that. How long have you been in California? Remind me. Like this time?
All told, 13 years, but the most recent has been 5. I mean, I've been back here for 5. So that's how long we've been doing this show, which is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, because we started that one year I was in Nashville and I had to have something to do in that place. And, then I got left there again.
How are things going since we last chatted? All good and busy, obviously. Busy. I mean, busy for me too.
Yeah, busy. Yeah, I think I'm experiencing like a post-pandemic FOMO of like, I want to do all the things. And for me, that just means really dorky, geeky stuff. But I'm sort of overrun with, the new normal of, house duties and things like that. I can't imagine what it's like for you, because there's like a third person that lives in your house now that you are fully responsible for, or at least 50% responsible for.
She's quickly evolving too. Like she's almost crawling and walking. It's like, holy shit, here we go. It's like every time I think I've sort of mastered the level of the video game that we're on, she upgrades to another form, right. And I'm like, oh shoot, we got to start all over again. Not all over again. That's incorrect, but like,
no, of course, it's a resource drain, right? It's like, what do you call that in the video game where you just kind of get the grind? You know, you got to grind for a while before you level up.
Exactly. Well, you said FOMO, so I'm curious if you have caught up on anything. You sort of mentioned offline, a few shows maybe. Take us down the road, because I want to see what you're catching up on.
Well, it's funny because these are all things that like circumstantially have just sort of fallen into my vision, as it were. So I think I'm on the recorded record with you in talking about WandaVision and saying, oh, dude, I can't even get past episode 2. Mm-hmm. And I at your urging had like started episode 3 and then was just fast forwarding, and like I'd heard about some interesting scenes, and I'm like doing the thing where I'm like just basically fast forwarding to see if that scene would keep me hooked. I forget about it for months, I guess. I don't know how long it's been out. And my 10-year-old niece, who we are trying to get on this podcast because she has got some opinions for Mr. Joss Whedon and his run on the Avengers movies. But anyway, I was hanging out with my brother's kids last week in Nashville, and was forcibly made to watch WandaVision episode 3, and had the top of my skull blown off by sitting down to watch that, and promptly got back to California and just binged the rest of the series, like lying on a beanbag in front of my TV. So that I am still struck by the juxtaposition of how much I disliked the first episode and how much I liked the last 6 episodes of, or episode 3 through 9, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I, this part of me, this sort of cynical, critical part of me wants to, like have critical opinions on it. Like how, that, what a bad start to that. Like they should have hinted at what was to come or whatever. I don't know how to parse that, but it's a thing where I'll never go back to watch that first episode. I struggled through that twice, I think, and was just like, what is going on? I hate everything about this.
Now you can go back to rewatch it even knowing how it ends.
Right. Like to me, it was, they did such a good job of recreating like an episode of like, what do I want to say? That was like, Leave It to Beaver or something, or, it wasn't even as fun as Bewitched to me, but, certainly trying to be. But anyway, I thought it was no fun. I just did not like that episode. And
but what I'm saying is, like, now that you know how it ends, because you could almost take and spoilers about WandaVision if you haven't.
Yeah, spoilers. It's been out for months.
Yeah. But it's like you get to that moment towards the end where you see how she created the town and all of this.
Yeah.
You could almost go back and immediately start watching episode 1, going, "Holy shit, this is where it began." And just kind of and with that knowledge. Okay, all right.
I mean, I can see watching the 3 through 9 again because watching Captain Marvel, I was so interested in what they were going to do with Monica Rambeau, like in the Captain Marvel movie, and so gratified by her story arc in this, and just like that was I loved that. Like to the point where that almost felt like for a while I was following that like that was the A story.
Yeah.
Wanda was like a distant B story. But then when Agatha shows up, I was like, okay, now this is interesting. And then the moment where Agatha is, says like, that's chaos magic. You're the Scarlet Witch. It just all snapped together for me, and I went, yes, yes, yes. Like I love everything now. And it was great. I mean, what a good series, and like and we'll get into it in a second, but like with Loki, along with Loki, what a crazy thing that Marvel is doing with the timelines post Endgame. Like it's really, really cool.
I went into it. No, I had a hunch WandaVision would be something special.
Yeah, you totally did. Yeah, you did.
Glad, part of me really wanted them to recreate the amazing Tom King Vision book.
Right.
And they did. They actually they homage.
There were nods to it.
Yeah, which is great. But I appreciate what they did here. Because it still leaves open that possibility down the road that they could end up doing the Vision comic at some point. We could talk about how that could even happen, but I like what they did here, and I think you're absolutely on point. The Monica Rambeau thing, once you see where she dusts back into the hospital room where her mom had died, and then you see her story, that really was the A story for a while. And the fact that they cast so perfectly that character, you really can see that that's the little girl who grew up to be the Monica that we saw in the show. I loved everything about that. I loved the bittersweet ending. That more than anything else, I liked that there was a resolution, but it was a bittersweet one. And she had to say goodbye. She had to leave this town. People in the town are not very happy with her. She didn't save the day so much as kind of restored normality with, everybody not being very happy. Kind of like COVID. So in some ways, I dug that. Conversely, I don't know if you've seen Falcon and Winter Soldier, but that had a more sort of, classic ending, where it's sort of like, okay, and it's what you wanted to see, but it felt more like, okay, everybody kind of gets what they want. And that's okay. But something about the bittersweet endings really hit me. I was actually interested. Yeah. I was rewatching the third of the Dan Brown, Tom Hanks, Da Vinci Code movies.
There's a third?
There's a third one. It's called Inferno. And
what?
Yeah, it came out like 3 years ago. The book's been out for a while, but the movie came out about 3 years ago. It's Tom Hanks, of course, and then it's I just forgot her name. She's Jyn Erso in Star Wars. What the heck's her name?
My gosh!
I see her.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Google it. Yeah, thank you.
She's in it too, but that movie also has somewhat of a bittersweet ending, and I'm just like, I think that's why I like it better than the other two. They're all very different. But something about that Inferno, I think it's because there's this bittersweet ending that, nobody really gets what they want entirely, and there's sort of this, I don't know, there's this melancholy to it. That resonates with me on a deep level for some reason.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I think that's that's what makes so much of what Marvel's done really good, where they're making good movies,
Yeah.
But you and I have discussed in the past this whole conundrum of like, should it be a series or a movie? Yeah. And a lot of times we come down on a point like some of those older, 5 years ago Marvel series could have been a series, just shorter,
Yes.
And I remember with the yeah, exactly. That's the classic case of like, you could have easily taken out 2.5 episodes and it would have been awesome. Or Luke Cage too,
Yeah.
With Captain Marvel, the movie, I remember you saying I would have liked that more as a series. And I thought no. And then this, watching WandaVision, I thought, in my mind, I'm playing that game of like, okay, well, what if they had done this as a movie? You couldn't have done a full 30-minute sitcom premise episode at the beginning. But if you did like a 5-minute cold open, that would have been, I would have been struck by that in a movie, like depending on the pacing and all that kind of stuff. That would have really thrown me off, and I kept thinking like this could be a good movie, but I think you'd have to lose so much of the Monica story and the FBI agent and what's her name from Thor,
Darcy.
Darcy, and I keep wanting to call him Agent Woo. Is that correct?
Maybe. I forget. Now that's gonna drive me nuts too. You know, there's a poetry in that the first Marvel sanction. We're not talking about like the Netflix co-production,
right?
But like the first by Marvel from Marvel TV series uses all the history of television to tell its story. You know,
it's amazing.
Really kind of cool, but like. So for that to be in a movie, I think would have kind of broken that symmetry up a little bit too much for me. So I really dug it. Did you watch Falcon and Winter Soldier?
No, but I would love to talk about it because that's another one where I know the story of it. Whereas WandaVision, I went in pretty pure. Like I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was so excited. Like, again, with Monica Rambeau, I was like, how are they going to make this character into the superpowered person that I grew up with as Captain Marvel? Like when in the 80s when I was reading comics, she was Captain Marvel. And then she's had like a million other names since then, like Photon, Pulsar, whatever. And so I just wondered, I really thought like, oh, this is just, it's going to be her as a human. Like she's not going to develop any powers. So I was so excited when that happened. Anyway, divert to Falcon and Winter Soldier because that's one where I know what happens in the story. I just,
The reason I bring that up is because if there were to be one of these Marvel series that would maybe function better as a movie, that would be the one. Because right. The episodic nature of WandaVision is essential. I would even say, to a large extent, the episodic nature of Loki helps that show work too. I don't think it's fine. They use it to great effect in Falcon Winter Soldier, but it's not necessary. It's not needed in the same way it's needed for WandaVision and Loki. It could be a great 2-hour movie and function more or less the same, in my opinion.
So is Falcon and Winter Soldier, are they breaking any conventions with like making this episodes versus a movie? Like you know what I mean? Like WandaVision felt like they were playing around with the entire theme of it being episodes. And Loki feels so much to me like issues of a comic. And Falcon and Winter Soldier just seemed to me like they were going to make a buddy cop movie.
Yeah.
Or a series.
Yeah, it's a buddy cop movie that just, you could watch it. WandaVision, there was something about it coming out weekly that I think actually, even though you didn't get on board at first because of the 1 and 2. Yeah. Coming out weekly it worked in its favor. You were able to create conversation and have that week in between where you can speculate and do all the fun things you can do with TV. And then again, Loki, you're dead on. Loki feels exactly like a comic book, sort of like an issue by issue series brought to life. Falcon Winter Soldier, you can watch it straight through and not feel like you've lost anything. Like in fact, I would argue the best way to watch Falcon Winter Soldier is straight through, because then there's a very cathartic, amazing moment in the last episode that just, it works better when you are closer to the first episode to kind of bookend it. And so I just think, it's shot exactly like a movie, whereas these others are shot more like conventional television. So it's got everything that a movie's got. It just happens to be broken up. It's almost like, they broke up Zack. Originally when they were going to do the Snyder Cut, right, it was going to be like as an episodic thing, and then they couldn't do that for legal pay, and pay reasons. So they had to just put it all out there in chunks at the same time. Whereas I think Falcon Winter Soldier kind of had that same vibe where it's like, this didn't need to be split up. Although, it's still just as good, but you can even see where the episodes start and finish. There's not a logic to it so much as, well, I guess we could just stop right here. It wasn't like they wrote an episode and went, how do we make the next episode tie into this one? It's like, here's the movie, and we'll just splice it up at various points that sort of makes sense, I guess.
Well, it feels so, story-wise to me, it feels like one of the older Marvel series where something happens at the end of Endgame, which makes sense to me, which is that Steve hands Sam the shield and is basically like, you're the new Captain America. And then they take that back to make the series where there's going to be a different new Captain America. And the series is going to be about how Sam earns it. And I'm like, well, Sam already earned it.
Sam earned it, but he gave it. Sam gave it back. Sam said, I'm not really worthy of this. No one should be Captain America. And then the government, well, yeah, there should be. So they pick this other dude, and then Sam immediately gets FOMO and jealous of the whole thing and regrets it. And then as the story progresses, he does the things that makes him both in his own mind and to the rest of the world worthy of the shield. He's even confronted with, does he take a super soldier serum? Mm-hmm. Yes or no? Like, there are things he does because it's important. It was important for Sam to be Captain America on his own terms. And I think the where he was falling short of it, when Steve handed him the shield, I think the initial reaction was, "Oh, you want me to be you?" And the wisdom, the unspoken wisdom of Steve is, no, I want you to be you, and this, and you're because you're you, you're worthy of this. You don't have to change to be. You don't have to become me, because like the entire show, and Bucky's going through a similar sort of transition. Like, both of these guys are constantly like under this pressure of we're never going to be Steve. There is no Steve. There shouldn't be any other Steve. And yeah, that's true. But you guys get to be who you are, and Steve can't be who you are. You guys are who you are. Embrace that. So by the end of the series, both guys have really embraced their kind of their true calling, their true purpose, and the world kind of recognizes them for it, and kind of the world shapes around them. Because they've proven it they've proven it to themselves more than anything.
And see, that the way you describe it is an interesting and worthy topic to explore in a series or movie. And then I guess my objection is including Bucky, who is a war criminal.
Yeah.
And like, I dislike his character so much.
They touch on that.
And it's like, to me, he's the Kylo Ren of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, to me, it's like irredeemable. If you want to just, redeem yourself, go be a social worker or something. Like, but stop using guns.
Well, so right away, they established that his entire life is based on that fact that he did some terrible things that, it was beyond his control. Unlike Kylo Ren, like, he really didn't have a choice in the matter. But he still feels that shame all the same. Like, they even cut back to him, like, right away in episode 1, they show him flashing back to, like, the 2000s or somewhere around there, where he's on a mission and he ends up killing a bystander who witnessed it. And then that bystander's father is living, he's befriended the father because he's trying to make amends for that. And he can't bring himself to tell the father, look, I killed your son. And so he's got this book of people that, like the 12-step program, he's got this book of people who have to forgive him for him to be able to move on and process. So he's seeing a psychiatrist, and him helping Sam realize his potential is kind of part of that journey too. It's like, look, if there's no Captain America, then who the hell am I? Like, that's Bucky. And it's like, and if there's no Captain America, how am I ever going to atone? If there's no Steve Rogers to tell me it's okay, you're still a good guy, then who am I? And so he's pressuring Sam to, like, you got to be Steve. And Sam's like, no, I can't. No one could be Steve, but Bucky needs that. And so they all kind of, I love how the show, everybody thrives, finds their own way to sort of to fulfill their own individual hero's journey. And yeah, Bucky, it's not like it ends and it's all snow and roses for Bucky and like everybody forgives him. Like, there's still that shadow hanging over him. And even there's a point in the series too where they hook up with Baron Zemo, who freaking Daniel Gruel, man, steals every scene he's in. And like, they need to keep that guy alive because they need at least one Marvel villain who doesn't just die and can kind of come back, and he's like super cool. But there's a scene where they all go to infiltrate this sort of this criminals club in Madripoor, which is sort of like a Singapore style city, and they're in there and like, they see Bucky walking in, and they're like, it's the Winter Soldier. Oh shit, there he is. Like, they're all scared of him. And and Baron Zemo just sort of like, he leans into that. He's he pretends like he's still under his control and all this stuff. So everybody's still, good, bad, or ugly, everybody still knows that's the Winter Soldier. The reputation precedes him. It's just, how does he, making amends is one thing, but I think, how does he learn to live in the world with that fact anyway? I think that's sort of his. And try his best, try to make up for it.
But clarify, like, is he still using guns and shooting people?
When it's necessary against bad guys, yes.
That sounds like such kid logic.
More of it is like less. I'm going back through. Like most of what he does fighting wise is use the arm. Like very rarely does he actually have a gun. There's a really cool scene though. You learn a hell of a lot more about what his time in Wakanda was like, and the Dora Milaje play a very crucial role in his recovery. And there's one Dora Milaje character in particular who you've seen before. I forget her name. They have a relationship that's no, it's not Okoye. It's a different one. It's like one of her sort of lieutenants. That I think seeing that and seeing how the Dora Milaje interact with Bucky, I think would give you a new perspective on his redeemability, if that makes any sense. Redemption. There we go. Not redeemability.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Anyway.
Well, I'll tell you one funny anecdote also from my recent visit to Nashville and seeing my niece and nephew. And so my niece was working her way through Falcon and Winter Soldier. And so she's like halfway through. And just one day we go to a Target and we're walking through the toy aisle and she sees a toy of the Falcon holding the shield. She just loudly is like, "Spoiler alert!"
Was it a different costume or was it just the shield?
Well, it's like him as Cap, you know,
Captain America. Okay.
Yeah, and so she hadn't figured out that was what was going to happen in the show.
Oh no! If you don't know, I mean, if you're one of those rare people who don't know, it's such an amazing reveal when it finally happens.
Right.
There's a whole like Rocky training montage where, you know, he's working with the shield and everything. He's like, you know, physically getting ready. And then he opens up this box that the Dora Milaje gave him. And you know, he sees what's inside, but we don't. And then the very next episode, you know, right away, he comes blasting in the full costume and the full spiel. And you're like, holy shit. It's such a satisfying, because the entire time, you know, he's wrestling with it. And then there's even they even bring in Isaiah Bradley, who in the comics was one of the black soldiers that they experimented on with the super soldier serum. And so, and they kind of threw him away. It was very much like a Tuskegee kind of experiment sort of thing. And he's the one who tells Sam, like, you know, like, this country's done nothing for you. Like, why would you wear its colors? Blah, blah, blah. And he has to prove to that guy that he's worthy of being Captain America and being so on his own terms. That's the most important thing. It's like, and Isaiah Bradley's probably one of the most skeptical of all. Like, you can't be Captain America. Like, what is that? You know, and you know, this sort of legendary black guy telling another black guy, like, you can't be Captain America. That must really sting. So for Sam to even convince him was like a really triumphant kind of thing. And then there's this really beautiful, beautiful scene. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it. At the end, that sort of wraps up that particular storyline. Just made me tear up. It was so good.
Well, that's cool. We should talk about Loki, which is blowing my mind.
Uh-oh. I think I lost you.
Yeah, I lost you.
Oh, shoot. We'll just note that.
We're at 31 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Have you finished it? Where are you in the run?
Okay, so I don't actually know when the new episodes come out, but I was caught up as of last night with episode 5. So
you're almost there. Today 6 came out today.
And is it the last one?
Yep. For this season. There's going to be a season 2, so just keep that in mind.
Well, the last episode, which I'm trying to find the episode guide to find the title of it, they're in the void and Richard E. Grant shows up as old Loki. I was dying. Like, that was amazing. And I just, that was, you know, Guy, you're totally right in what you said earlier of like, that has to be episodes. You know, this had to be a show. And it's just been, and I wasn't watching it week to week. I kind of did 3, 2-episode evenings to catch up on everything. But it was, I love what they're doing with all the timeline stuff where it's like initially they're trying to make it make sense. And then at some point, they just sort of throw their hands up like all the comics do. And it's like, nah,
Yep.
this is just going to be nuts. And then Owen Wilson is killing it in every
Yes.
episode.
Yes.
I mean, the supporting cast, or I wouldn't even call them supporting cast. It's just like ensemble. Like everyone is so good in this. And I didn't know I wanted Owen Wilson in like a cop procedural thing.
Yeah.
You know, where he's like sharing drinks with the judge in her chambers afterwards and stuff. It's like, oh my God, it's Law and Order Time Cops.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. There's going to be a lot more of that too. No, you're right. The ensemble is just solid across the board. This one was a little weirder to get into until I realized what you said earlier, that if WandaVision is true television, Falcon Winter Soldier is more like a movie split up into chapters. This is a comic series that's filmed. Like the way they structure the episodes are exactly like what an issue would feel like in terms of where it starts, where it stops, how it hands off into the next episode, the beats that it has. Like it really did feel like. So once I realized that, like I'm just reading a series, and by the time we get to episode 6, we'll have trade paperback volume 1, right? Like that's. And then when like the finale, season finale, really functions that way. Really like feels like, holy shit, this is the end of like the ending of this felt a lot like the ending of The Wicked and the Divine Volume 1, where it's just like, holy crap, you're ready for season 2 immediately. It has this, it evokes so many more questions that they're going to cover in other shows, in other seasons, in other movies, etc.
That's so cool. I just, I can't say more without just spoiling every single point of it that I liked, but where there were times where it got zany in this like 1970s, 80s Marvel way. Mm-hmm. There's specifically a scene when they meet the timekeepers, and I mean, at least I looked at them and was like, well, these effects suck. And then you realize like why the effects suck. And I was just dying. Like this is a Kirby, like a Ditko kind of thing, like that just happened. And oh my God. And Richard E. Grant as old Loki is just a thing I never knew I needed. Like I want a whole movie of his time on that planet alone after he runs from Thanos. That was amazing.
Do you think he is the Loki that we saw die in Infinity War, or is he a different, similar sort of events, but a distinctly different Loki than the one that we saw?
Well, I think, and I'll have to. Maybe we do a whole episode on Loki, but I am curious about in episode 6 if they fix some problems, because because it feels so zany like a comic, I'm trying not to get stuck on like the continuity problems of it. But one thing I don't understand is like, well, if a Nexus event happens and then the TVA goes and prunes that, like how did it even get there? Because it seems like time would have branched for so long for Loki to become old. Like Loki, to put that in that the concrete example you gave, if Richard E. Grant had not tried to stab Thanos, as Loki, and it had instead played dead and floated in space, that seemingly would have been the Nexus event. That the timekeepers would have said, hey, that's what we need to go fix, because that wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to kill Loki. Yeah. But somehow, like, Loki got to do that and then get really old before ever creating this Nexus event. I just don't understand how all the variants are of different ages and species and, genders. It's like, well, whenever the variant was created, that seems like that was the Nexus event. They keep showing this one single timeline. Well, if the timeline is singular, then you wouldn't have all these variants like at different ages and stuff. So I think they're like, I can't tell if they're just playing fast and loose with that, because eventually nothing's supposed to make sense. You're supposed to realize like, oh, this is all a sham, but
well, I asked because I desperately want that to be the aged version of the Tom Hiddleston we saw die in Infinity War, because he describes exactly what happens. He's like, Thanos killed me, but I created a projection so realistic even he wouldn't know, and I floated amongst the debris. So there's a thought that when that ship blows up, both Thor and Loki are floating out there, and Thor gets intercepted by the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Loki just kind of stays hidden, and becomes Richard E. Grant ultimately. I don't know how he gets the costume. That's another question, but I sort of want that to be the case. Maybe that's the point. Maybe in your own head canon, all these possibilities are allowed. But you're right. There is the question of like, if Sylvie exists at all, that itself is the Nexus event. She shouldn't have even gotten to the point where she was, on Asgard playing with her dolls or whatever it was.
Right.
Or the alligator Loki. It's like, well, how did that happen? So
Right.
maybe that's just, the question of like, what is an alternate universe versus an alternate timeline? Are they the same thing? I think like that I really want explored, and I'm sure they're gonna. Like, the beautiful thing about Marvel is they've gotten so good at seeding like the next four things so intentionally, so that it doesn't feel glazed over when they get to the more meaty stuff. It's like, oh, we've been talking about this for a little while now, so it's not like they introduce it in a movie and then 15 minutes later it's, you're like, well, you barely had a chance to understand what was going on. They solve it. It's like, this lets us really toy with these things. You're going to see something at the end of episodes. Well, not even at the end. You're going to see something pretty soon in episode 6 that that impacts probably the next, I would say, 5 years of Marvel content. And I for one cannot wait, because the particular actor that appears is just crushed. Like, I want more of him in everything, because he's absolutely crushing it.
I can't wait now.
I knew he was cast as this particular character. That wasn't a secret. But I've always, not knowing kind of anything about like how this character should act or sound. It's a character that really hasn't appeared in any of the cartoons, even really. So there's a lot. This is
exciting, because I have no idea who you're talking about. So I can't wait to just be totally shocked when I see this.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna say anything more. But like, by the time that episode was done, I rewatched it the second time. I'm like, I just want to watch his scenes, because he's so perfect. I'm like, I want more of this guy. Anyway, that aside,
what can I?
Oh, go ahead, sir.
Can I pivot to something that is strangely Marvel adjacent that I enjoyed, which was just surprising? And if I mentioned it to you in a text, I will have lessened the shock value, but otherwise, I think you're going to be shocked by this. I watched Men in Black International recently.
Oh, geez.
Enjoyed the crap out of it.
Now, that's the Hemsworth one, right?
And that's why I say it's MCU adjacent, because it is Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson. With basically their roles flipped from Ragnarok, where she is now the studious, by-the-book character, and Hemsworth is the fly-by-the-seat of his pants, like, kind of drunkard.
Interesting.
And their chemistry is great. I just really enjoyed that movie, and I don't know if it just caught me at the right time, or it was just zany enough or whatever, but I gotta, You're not locked in anymore, but if you do need to be, locked down for an evening, I would suggest it.
That kind of came and went without much fanfare, it feels like. And I don't know if that's just because so much was coming out at the same time. I think that was part of the problem. Because what was that, fall of 2019, summer of 2019?
I want to say that's where it was, yeah.
So much was coming out. I think that was part of the problem. But I think also I'd heard some reviews that were like, it's okay. But, so if you liked it,
it's nothing like amazing. But yeah, it's fun. That's the whole thing. It's like Emma Thompson. Is it Liam Neeson? Who's the guy whose daughter keeps getting stolen? Is that Liam Neeson?
Liam Neeson, yeah.
Yeah. It's like a great cast again. And just fun. I'll watch Hemsworth and Thompson do anything.
Tessa Thompson or Emma. Tessa Thompson is proving herself to be indisposable. Like, she first popped up for me in Creed, and she was great there. But she didn't get a lot to do because she was kind of the troubled girlfriend. So to see her face and be able to be comedic and she's a national treasure, Todd.
She is.
All the stuff.
And I don't think you've seen Annihilation with her.
I have not. I have not. You've talked about that before.
Yeah, she's creepy in that. Or the things that happen around her are very creepy.
Interesting.
What about what books have you been reading or are on your radar to be read?
Well, I'll tease some stuff, and some of this I want to save for future episodes, so I won't get too deep. But let me start by saying this. I was having something happened about a month or so ago where I looked at my TBR pile and I looked at my shelf, and then I looked at my like Kindle, or sorry, my Comixology TBR pile, and I just went, I give up. And so I got vicious on books that I either read and was kind of meh, or I was struggling through, because I had a few that I acquired that I'm just like, I mean, it felt more like homework. And I just, even if I wasn't done with it yet, I just put them all into a big box and I donated them all. I was like, you know what, here, I'm just going to get rid of all and purge down. I was trying to read like, I think maybe 9 or 10 separate series that are ongoing. I cut that back down to like 4. And really just sort of pared down as much as I could. I have not been happier as a reader for a long time. I think I got I think maybe pandemic kind of fueled sort of a weird obsession with just trying to read as much as I could without really being as discerning as I once was.
Yeah. Okay.
So I cut a lot of it, and it's really great. So I ended up in that time really falling back in love with Comixology again, just because some of the books I had, I even like did a couple of things where I took some trade paperbacks that were taking up room on my shelf that I hadn't come back to, and I was like, why haven't I come back to this? Is it because I just don't like the format? And so there's one of those was a trade paperback I think I've talked about before called Comeback. Speaking of time travel, it's a wonderful little time travel story, self-contained, single volume. I had purchased the trade paperback at first and liked it a lot, but I just hadn't reread it. And I'm like, well, why am I not rereading this? Ended up getting it on Comixology, and that is absolutely the correct medium for that story. Because it does, you need to see it. You need to see it in single guided view panels, because certain panels spoil, even if you're looking at the same page, certain panels will spoil what's to come. And you need that sort of, for this particular story, you need that unexpected change, and like you need that kind of cinematic feel. So I ended up rebuying it on Comixology and think and love it even more now. So I did that with a few books. And in doing that, there are a few series I've always wanted to check out that happened to be on sale on Comixology. So I grabbed them and fell in love with those too. So one of those is called Port of Earth, which has been out for a little while. If you've seen it in store, it's got a black and white cover and like a very bold orange kind of logo. I got volume 1. There are 3 volumes out now, but it's a great little limited series. It's basically, the premise is aliens visit Earth, and we learn that most of the interstellar spacecraft needs water to be powered somehow. So they basically, the kind of what I can only call corporate aliens, come down, do this deal with Earth to build a spaceport and use Earth as a refueling station, like a gas station, like a roadside gas stop for, like the I would say the immediate galactic vicinity. And so they've got all these aliens landing, but they're never supposed to interact with humans. They're supposed to come, fill up, and then go. They're not supposed to stay. They build the port like way out in the Pacific Ocean, so you can kind of see it from, the California coast, but you can't really get there easily. There's high security. And so it really is like this weird little corporate relationship. And like the planet doesn't really get a lot out of it. I think we get a little technology here and there, but we don't really benefit much from this. So there's all these questions around, should we be doing this? Is this, if we're not getting anything out of this, are they taking advantage of us? What was the deal that was really crafted? They're all cagey about it, like the NATO or the World Trade, whatever world organization made this deal. They don't get into the details. So there's all these questions. So naturally, these resistance groups start to pop up, protesting the fact that this port's there, protesting the fact that the world keeps getting worse and we're not getting anything out of this. And then one day, alien gets out of the port and actually kills some people. And so that sparks this entire outrage. Like, we gotta end this port deal, but we can't, because at this point it's so the alien kind of confederation has relied so much on this port that now it's an essential part of their trade route. So we can't get out of it. So it really ties all these things together. Just a fantastic little series. I think you could probably get it physically, and it would be great too. But the art is really good. The story clips along at a really nice pace. You get a lot of flashbacks. You get a lot of like, I like it because like a lot of comics that sort of, do a near future kind of thing. They really nail how humanity would behave. You really get the sense that this is pretty much what would happen if these events got set in motion. I could easily buy that this is what would occur. Like I don't have to suspend disbelief at all. So you just get to see like, xenophobia manifests no matter what it is. If it's humans versus aliens, it's still, it's weird racism appears. Like it's all of that stuff is baked into. So it's got these interesting political, context and things. So highly recommend that.
Now, have you read more than volume 1?
Not yet. No, I have been along with some other stuff, but volume 2 is on my list. So as soon as I kind of get through my next batch, I'm going to go back to that too. I did get, because Jupiter's Legacy was on Netflix, and I knew it existed. I'd sort of flirted with it in the past, so I ended up borrowing, and then eventually buying Jupiter's Legacy volume 1 and 3. And just, it's okay. I mean, Mark Millar, Frank Quietly, two legends. Great work. I know a lot of people who love this series. It just wasn't for me. And the Netflix show was really underwhelming too. I kept trying to find my way in, thinking, well, maybe if I just stick with it, I'll like it, because it's sort of oddly fascinating. But I don't know. I think it's a tired story. Like the idea of the damaged superhero can only be. I think Alan Moore said it all in Watchmen, and we've seen it. Right. We've seen it redressed a few times, but I think.
And also after Boys, Boys just shredded it. So
yeah.
Where do you go from there?
I don't know which came first, Jupiter's Legacy or Boys, in terms of the comics.
Right.
That's a good question, but either way, I'm not really a fan. But then, and this is the fun thing, I fell into 2 series that have absolutely become my new obsession. Started this podcast, I was really getting into Image single series. So at that time, Southern Cross, East of West, Postal, No Mercy, like just these amazing series that I got addicted to quickly and consumed quickly. And since then, there have been years where I found some stuff, but I really haven't had that same kind of just rocket fuel like I did that spring, summer of 2015. Well, I might be back there, because there's these 2 series I discovered. Both of them are currently ongoing, and they're just fantastic. And so there's one series called 7 Secrets. It's written by Tom Taylor, illustrated by Danielle Di Nicolo, and some other fine folks there too. It is just unbelievable. It's on issue 9, and I have consumed them all. Premise is this: there are essentially there are 7. There's kind of a secret society that each protect a briefcase, and each briefcase contains a world-changing, cataclysmic secret that should never be revealed to humanity. And each briefcase is protected by a carrier and like a protector. So there's always 2. And and the carriers are very different depending on what the secret is. So if the secret is, more sort of spooky and sort of ethereal, then the protectors have sort of a personality that kind of matches that. And so you get very different groups of people, and so they're all part of the secret society. Well, 2 of the, one of the pairs that protects the secret end up having a kid, which is not allowed in this order. You're not allowed to have kids. So they have this kid, and they don't, instead of abandoning the kid, they take him and they basically raise him. The order raises him, and he eventually figures out that his parents are part of the order, and that's revealed fairly early on. But you get to see all of this backstabbing and plots within plots, and there's this one guy, this rogue guy, and this other sort of rogue, kind of almost like New World Order Freemasonry group that's trying to get the secrets. It's just fantastic. It plays a lot like a samurai movie. At times it's like Kingsman. At times it's like a great samurai movie. At times it's like Mission Impossible. At times it's just like batshit crazy and you don't know what's going to happen. The illustration is just Like, you really feel action. Like, every panel is drawn like with, almost like it's setting up the effect shots in a movie, and like even like the close-ups on faces, very cinematic, very detailed, great lighting, just everything about it. It doesn't look like Nick Dragata art, but it has the same energy as Nick Dragata art does, where just it pulls you in. So I'll do a deeper dive on it when we get to the first. I think the first trade paperback is out, but when the series is done, I want to do a bigger episode. So 7 Secrets, definitely check that out. And then another image series called Deep Beyond. You'll like this because it's a Mirka Andolfo book. Starring, also created by David Goy, Andrea Baracato, and then Barbara Nozenzo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So Mirka Andolfo book. I don't even want to say too much. I'll just give you the quick back of the book thing. They do a great job in every issue to give you the story so far at the beginning. So here's one of those little blurbs. The year is 2085. A series of cataclysmic events in the year 2000 made the Earth almost uninhabitable, resulting in humans living in colonies, depending on technology to defend themselves from the polluted environment and monsters stalking the sea. Pamela Bell, a scientist on a mission to study the North Atlantic Ocean in a region where anomalies have been discovered, is stuck in deep waters with her submarine. Before the situation becomes desperate, Pamela is able to send an SOS out, but then she disappears. And then you're following Pamela's partner and friends trying to solve this mystery about what happened to her in the ocean. So it's got some of that Mirka Andolfo sensibility. They do a great job of really quickly setting up like how the world got to this point. They really introduce the characters quickly and efficiently. It's a very focused story, very tight. You really get, it doesn't meander a lot. So you don't feel like you're, with every page, with every issue, you get pulled in a little deeper, and there's twists and turns, but they don't, like some books like this, they might introduce like a whole other cast of characters, and you got to figure out, follow kind of these weird storylines. Not here. You really feel like it's an intimate story told, but in a bigger world. Pardon me. And they're on, I think, issue maybe 5 or 6 by now. So definitely check that out too. Deep Beyond, Mirka Andolfo, and then 7 Secrets. That definitely is my jam. And then also pick up Port of Earth. I think you
that one,
like that one.
Port of Earth is that's the one that sounds the most intriguing to me. I don't know why. Just it's just the right time to have aliens as your business partners story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you might even be able to borrow issue 1 on Comixology. So check that out too. At the very least, I got mine fairly discounted. So buy it if you got it too. And I think Port of Earth physically would work just as well as it would on Comixology. There's nothing inherent to it. Whereas I think 7 Secrets you need guided view for 7 Secrets, because you need to kind of, how guided view has like the dramatic zoom ins and zoom outs as you hit a panel, you see a speech bubble, and then you flip and it zooms out so you can see the whole thing. You need that with books like 7 Secrets. It just, whereas Port of Earth, I think you can get away with the physical.
Well, that's, and I like, I'm glad you brought up, oh my God, it just escaped my mind. The Mirka Andolfo series.
Deep Beyond.
Deep Beyond, because our episode we tried to record a couple weeks ago, I said, guess what? I've finally read Mercy Volume 1.
That's right.
Which is it is like the labor of the pandemic, because the first 2 issues came out right as lockdown was happening. I talked about them, and it was right around the time Decorum was coming out. And then in July, I talked about maybe 3 issues, and I remember maybe 3-4 issues. And I remember proclaiming you know what? I'm just going to wait till this arc finishes, and then I'm going to read it. And I had prepared this whole thing, and we're going into I'm going into my day, whatever day of the week that was, knowing tonight Taylor and I are recording, and I got to talk about Mercy. I'm going to do my homework and listen to that episode where I stopped reading it. And I went back and listened to that episode, which was episode 149 that we did. And I went, you know what? Halfway through the arc, I pretty much wrapped it up. So we're good. I don't need to talk about it. And so I'm I'm so curious about Deep Beyond because one of my hypotheses was I've read a couple things that America has written, and I thought Unnatural was awesome, and I thought Unsacred was pretty corny, and Mercy I just thought was kind of messy. And so I'm interested in, a series where she is not the writer and I'm just looking at her art. And so maybe Deep Beyond is that blend of sci-fi and Mirka Andolfo art that I'm going to love.
Well, I don't know if she's the artist. I think she's the writer. But let me just double check.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wait, I thought when you read it, oh boy. Well, I mean, your praise for it makes me think maybe it's tightened up.
I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm just looking here. Let's see if it's clarified. It just says created by Mirka Andolfo, David Goy, and then Andrea Borricardo. There we go. And Barbara Nozenzo. The fonts are a little hard to read, so that's why I'm butchering the names. So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't see. You see at the very end if they say it doesn't have. I mean, maybe you'll pick up quicker than I did. Maybe it will say you'll be like, oh, that's of course she drew it, or no, of course she didn't. I don't know.
Well, I saw on Comixology it said teaming up with writer David Goy. But it also says rising star artist Andrea Brocardo. Mm-hmm. So maybe Mirka and David wrote it together. Andrea drew it and Barbara Nozenzo colored it. I don't know. But I'm intrigued, it's weird too, because, we're big champions of the auteur work, the thing that's like the creator owned and driven, and it's not beholden to any market fluctuations kind of thing. But sometimes that slips, and we've mentioned where it slips. So yeah,
you should. We can do a joint episode on that series.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll give you a preview of something I'm going to cover in an upcoming episode, which is not strictly a comic book, but it is a memoir called The Way She Feels: My Life on the Borderline in Pictures and Pieces by Courtney Cook. And it is her memoir of growing up with borderline personality disorder.
Oh,
and
wow.
It is like punctuated with drawings throughout that aren't strictly like comic book, but it does give it an interesting flow where like there's whole sections where it's just full page drawings. But then there are these essays where she has, drawn, like she's illustrated things, events of the essay. And it's just really interesting to read. And I'm only like a third of the way through it. But just loving the style of it, and just that it's kind of pulling apart that, that expectation of like what a memoir is versus like whether it's a prose memoir or a comics memoir,
How did you stumble onto this?
Interesting story. I took a writing workshop from Courtney Cook this spring.
Whoa! Interesting.
Yeah. And it was just a random circumstance. I just signed up for a writing workshop on, I believe, writingworkshops.com, and didn't know anything about her, and then read that, her memoir is coming out, and I just pre-ordered it. And so I only got it like last week when it was released. Just excited to read it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I think that covers a lot of good potluck catch-up stuff for us.
Yeah. As always, we intend to get back to our one book per show routine. Yeah. We loved that so much, and we were like, every time we get in a thing where we're like, we got the engine running, no problem. Something, gets stuck in the spokes and the whole thing falls apart, which is what happened a couple weeks ago. Although as I'm saying now, I think that was a blessing, because if I'd done a third show about Mercy, it would have been too much, and very repetitive. So it's good to talk about fresh stuff that's entertaining us, and refocus us on those books that are coming up, I have borrowed my limit of 50 books from Comixology, so I've got to plow through them or return them all.
I would argue, as hard as it is to do, I would very much argue for, or rather make a case for just declaring TBR pile bankruptcy and just just let it go and start, because at some point the TBR pile becomes more obligation than enjoyment.
Yeah.
And that's where it hit me that way. I was like, why am I just reading books that I'm just not, I don't want to call them mediocre. They're just not hitting me as they should. And I just move on. I don't have to struggle. I
take inspiration from you calling it bankruptcy. And, it was a little bit easier for me to practice during lockdown. Like I would, I'd read 5-10 pages and go, no, it's not for me. And I'd go on to the next.